She was a quiet girl with a broken dream. He was a powerful CEO, trapped in a world built by others. One unexpected night brought them together, just a moment, just a spark. But when she vanished, she left behind more than a note. She left a mark on his soul. Months later, he walked away from fame, fortune, even a high-profile engagement, just to find her again. Will love be enough to heal them both? Or is it too late? Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city below. And don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable love stories that will steal your heart. New York City pulsed with neon lights and restless ambition as Emma Reed stepped out of the subway into the chill of an early October evening. Her breath curled in front of her, vanishing into the bustle of Manhattan like her confidence after a long, unremarkable day at work. Her white blouse was slightly wrinkled under a black cardigan, and her dark jeans clung to her slim frame as she blended into the swarm of office workers and dreamers. Her chestnut hair, tied in a low bun, was beginning to fray at the edges, much like her composure. She adjusted her thin-rimmed glasses and kept her gaze on the sidewalk, avoiding eye contact as she crossed the street toward the Plaza Midtown Hotel. The last place she wanted to be tonight was in a ballroom full of people who smiled too wide and talked too loud. Her boss, Janice, had insisted she attend. "You've got to be seen, Emma. You're talented, but no one climbs the ladder from behind a desk." Emma had nodded, though the words stung. She had spent the last 6 months pouring her heart into every article she edited, every meeting she prepared, and every extra shift she picked up. But when the associate editor position opened, it had gone to someone louder, shinier. "You're solid, Emma, but you're not standout," Janice had said, the compliment laced with a blade. Emma hadn't cried. She simply went home that night, curled up with an old Hitchcock film, and reminded herself that it didn't matter. But it did. The hotel lobby was a sea of designer suits and manicured charm. Emma flashed her company badge to the attendant, her shoulders stiff as she entered the grand ballroom. Golden chandeliers shimmered above, and soft jazz poured from a live quartet near the stage. She wove through the crowd, feeling like a ghost among the polished, the confident, the important. No one noticed her. That was both a blessing and a curse. She found a quiet corner and clung to it, cradling a glass of white wine like it was the only anchor she had. The fabric of her simple black dress tugged at her nerves. It wasn't ugly, but in a room of sequins and stilettos, it made her feel invisible. She took a sip, then another. Her chest felt tight with the weight of inadequacy. Her eyes darted around the room, not for connection, but escape. She didn't belong here. Across the room, Grayson Hale leaned against the marble bar, his navy suit jacket slung carelessly over the back of a chair. The knot of his tie was loose, and the first 2 buttons of his shirt undone. He nursed a glass of scotch with all the grace of a man who was done pretending. The gala was supposed to be a celebration. His company had just launched a breakthrough product. But a major investor had backed out that morning, and the fallout was swift and personal. He hated this scene. The fake laughter, the networking vultures, the air of performance. He wanted out. But then his eyes caught on her. She wasn't like the women who usually approached him, confident, sharp-tongued, hunting for opportunity. No, this woman was curled up in a corner like she was trying to disappear. Her expression was distant, her eyes tinged with sadness. Something about the way she gripped her glass, like it was her last thread of control, drew him in. He didn't know her, but he wanted to. Grayson crossed the room with the effortless charm of a man used to owning attention. But when he reached her, he didn't make a show of it. He slid into the chair beside her, not waiting for permission, and offered a quiet smile. "This place feels more like a job fair for people with perfect teeth, don't you think?" he said, voice low, playful. Emma flinched, startled. Her wine nearly spilled. She turned, eyes narrowing behind her glasses, but said nothing. He waited. She finally muttered, "Guess so." He tilted his head, studying her. "You were dragged here, weren't you?" A pause. Then the faintest smile played at her lips. Was it that obvious? "Clear as day," he said, and clinked his glass gently against hers. "Cheers to the misfits." Emma told herself it was just a night, just a blur of emotions and too much wine and a man who smiled like he could see through her. She repeated it like a mantra on the subway ride home, as the city streaked by outside the window, as her fingers toyed with the folded cuff of her coat. But nothing quieted the way her skin still buzzed where his hand had rested on her back, how his low chuckle echoed in her ears, or how she'd whispered just one night before slipping out of the hotel room at dawn like a thief in her own story. She hadn't even looked back. She left the note and left the warmth, the temptation, the danger of wanting something more. Back in her Brooklyn apartment, she stood by the kitchen sink, staring at the peeling wallpaper, clutching a glass of water with both hands. Her dress was wrinkled, hair a mess, and yet her heart beat like she was still in that hotel room. With him. Grayson. The name still tasted unfamiliar, like a dream too vivid to forget. She'd meant to wash the night away, shower, change, move on, but instead she sat on the edge of her bed, the city's hum leaking through the window, and wondered how someone could make her feel so seen in just a few hours. Meanwhile, across Manhattan, Grayson Hale sat in his corner office, staring at the note she'd left on the nightstand. The words were rushed, scribbled in a shaky hand. Just one night. Thank you for seeing me. He must have read it a dozen times. He didn't even know her last name. Just Emma. Just her laugh, quiet, rare, like a secret. Her eyes, soft, guarded, aching for something she wouldn't ask for. He wasn't supposed to care. It was one night. No strings. No names. That was the unspoken rule. But Grayson wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating right. He sat through meetings barely hearing a word, his fingers tracing the edge of the note folded into the inside pocket of his suit. Something about her had cracked him open. She didn't ask him questions, didn't fawn over his title or try to impress him. She didn't even know who he was, or if she did, she never let it show. She simply talked. About books she loved, about feeling small in a big city, about not being enough. And he listened, really listened, for the first time in years. He had assistance, he had resources. He could have found her. Probably. But some part of him hesitated. Maybe he didn't want to break the spell. Maybe he was afraid she'd look at him in the daylight and see something different. Or maybe he just wasn't sure if he deserved another moment with her. 3 weeks later, fate stepped in. Emma walked into the sleek boardroom of Hale Core Technologies, her tablet clutched to her chest, dressed in a tailored navy dress and low heels that still pinched her feet. Her media company, Pine and Crest, had been acquired in a surprise deal, and today was the first partner integration meeting. She wasn't supposed to be nervous, but her throat was tight as she rehearsed her pitch in her head, hoping her voice wouldn't crack. She didn't notice him at first. Grayson noticed her immediately. He was standing at the far end of the room, arms folded, engaged in conversation with the CFO. Then their eyes met, and the world tilted. Her breath caught. His jaw tightened. Neither moved. Emma's fingers dug into the tablet as her name was called. Emma Reed, editorial strategist from Pine and Crest, someone said, but the words felt muffled. She forced herself forward, praying her legs wouldn't give out. Grayson stepped aside as she passed him, his gaze burning into her back like sunlight through glass. She sat down, heart pounding, refusing to look his way again. Grayson's eyes never left her, so this was fate, or chaos, or both. And somehow their story wasn't over. Emma tried to act like she hadn't noticed, like the man sitting across the conference table wasn't the same one who had once traced the edge of her collarbone with his fingertips, whispering jokes that made her laugh when she didn't want to. She stared at the slides on the screen and nodded at all the right times, but inside, her pulse raced like a warning siren. She didn't dare look at him again, but she could feel him. Grayson Hale, in his perfectly tailored suit, watching her like she was the only one in the room, as if 3 weeks of silence hadn't passed, as if he still held that piece of her from that night. When the meeting ended, she packed her things quickly, eager to vanish. But before she could slip out, his voice cut through the air like a familiar song. "Miss Reed," he said smoothly, "are you available for a brief follow-up discussion?" She froze. So did half the room. Her colleague, Eric, nudged her with a grin. "That's the CEO himself, Emma. Big moment." She forced a polite smile. "Of course." In a private lounge, away from the buzz of the team, Emma stood with arms crossed, a wall of professionalism cloaking the chaos beneath her skin. Grayson poured 2 glasses of water, placing one in front of her. "You disappeared," he said without preamble. "I left," she corrected, coolly. It was just one night, remember? Grayson leaned forward. You think I forgot that? I've thought of little else. She shook her head, looking away. Please don't do this. Let's keep this professional. His voice softened. I'm trying, Emma. I swear I am. But you walk into that room, and everything I've tried to forget just reignites. Emma didn't respond. She picked up her bag and left, her footsteps echoing down the corridor like thunder. In the weeks that followed, Grayson didn't back down. He sent her emails with half-joking subject lines, meeting notes and mild flirting, follow-up, you still haunt my thoughts, and once, simply sorry for being a walking distraction. He brought her coffee, vanilla latte just the way she liked it, though she never told him how. He always remembered. At first, she ignored him. Then she replied tersely. Then, without meaning to, she smiled when she read a note scribbled on a project folder. Read, I dare you to smile in your next presentation. Bet it'll boost Q2 morale. She told herself it meant nothing. Just charm. Just antics from a man who could afford to play. But every time he looked at her like she mattered, it chipped away at her resolve. Then came the news. Aurora Kensington, heiress, philanthropist. The woman Grayson's father had groomed for a political tech merger since they were teens. Rumors surfaced online, articles with headlines like Hail to Wed Kensington, a power couple in the making, and engagement imminent between tech giant and banking royalty. Emma read them in stunned silence, her heart folding in on itself. It made sense. Aurora was stunning, accomplished, belonged in Grayson's world. Emma was just Emma. An editorial assistant with secondhand handbags and an apartment that shook when the train passed. He had been playing. She resigned the next day. No goodbye, no confrontation. She left her badge on her desk and walked out of the building like it had never happened, like he had never happened. Grayson didn't find out until 2 days later when her email bounced and her name was no longer listed on the project roster. He stormed down to the floor himself, demanding to know where she went, but no one had answers, only shrugs and whispers. He returned to his office in silence, closed the door, pulled the note she left weeks ago from his drawer. Just one night. Thank you for seeing me. He held it tightly in his hand and whispered, I see you, Emma, still. And in that moment, Grayson Hale knew something he hadn't been brave enough to admit before. He wasn't willing to let her become a memory. The small coastal town of Fairhaven, Maine, was a world away from the steel skyline of New York. Emma stood barefoot on her sister's back porch, the wooden planks cold beneath her feet, the ocean breeze lifting strands of her hair as seagulls cried overhead. She clutched a steaming mug between her hands, trying to chase away the chill that had seeped into her bones weeks ago, ever since she'd seen the headline and packed her life into a single suitcase. Her sister, Paige, hadn't asked too many questions. Just hugged her tightly and said, stay as long as you need. Emma hadn't meant to stay more than a weekend, but the days blurred. She helped Paige stock shelves at the local bookstore, watched old movies in their childhood living room, and tried, really tried, not to think about Grayson. She avoided social media, news feeds, any mention of Halecore or Kensington or New York. But at night, when the house was quiet, the memory of him crept in. The way he had looked at her, like she was the only person in a room full of noise. The way he made her feel like she mattered. She told herself it wasn't real. Just a game, just charm. Just a man doing what men like him did before settling into the life he was meant for. A life with a woman like Aurora Kensington. What Emma didn't know was that back in New York, Grayson Hale was unraveling. He had ended the engagement, not quietly. In front of 300 guests at the penthouse event, his father had orchestrated with surgical precision. Grayson had stood beside Aurora and said no. No to the ring. No to the cameras. No to the future his family had scripted since he was a teenager. I can't marry someone I don't love, he'd said into the microphone, his voice steady despite the chaos swelling around him. Because the woman I love isn't here. She's out there somewhere, and I let her go. Reporters erupted. Aurora stormed out. His father seethed. But Grayson didn't flinch. The moment the chaos subsided, he called Clara, his most trusted assistant, and gave her one order. Find Emma Reed. I don't care what it takes. Clara worked quickly, piecing together scraps of data, Emma's last known address, her resignation email, a shipping label from a returned package. 3 days later, Clara handed him an address in Maine. "No guarantees," she said, "but I think she's there." He didn't wait. Grayson drove 6 hours through a heavy storm, arriving in Fairhaven at dusk, headlights slicing through the mist as the coast came into view. He parked in front of a small red brick house with blue shutters and a worn garden swing. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to warn him. This was either redemption or foolishness. He knocked. The door opened a crack, revealing a young woman with a toddler on her hip and a skeptical gaze. "Paige." "Yes?" "I'm looking for Emma," Grayson said, drenched and breathless. "Please. I need to talk to her." Paige looked him over. The soaked designer coat, the exhaustion in his eyes, the desperation barely hidden behind practiced confidence. She nodded once, then turned and called into the house. "Emma, you have a visitor." Emma appeared at the end of the hallway, her breath catching as she saw him. The cup in her hand slipped slightly. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Grayson stepped inside, rain dripping from his coat onto the hardwood floor. "I came to tell you something," he said, eyes locked on hers. "I canceled the engagement, walked out, told the world I couldn't marry someone I didn't love." Emma stared at him, stunned. "Why would you do that?" "Because I was wrong," he said quietly. "That night wasn't just one night for me. It was the start, and I was a coward for not saying it sooner." She tried to speak, but emotion lodged in her throat. She turned away, her shoulders trembling. Grayson moved closer, voice barely a whisper. "Please, let me prove it wasn't a game. Let me stay. Even if you never forgive me, just let me try." And for the first time in weeks, Emma didn't run. Emma didn't answer him that night. She couldn't. Her heart was too full, her mind too tangled with everything he'd just said. So she told him to come back tomorrow. Grayson nodded, respecting the space, even though every fiber in him wanted to stay. He left his number on a note, scribbled hastily, folded, and placed on the porch swing like a quiet offering. The next morning, the note was gone, but Emma didn't call. Not that day, or the next. But he waited anyway. Grayson stayed in Fairhaven, renting a small room above the bakery 2 blocks from her sister's house. He didn't try to rush her. Instead, he showed up at Paige's bookstore every afternoon, helping restock shelves, reading to the children during story hour, and keeping his distance. Emma watched him from the back room through the open door, pretending to be busy organizing book returns, her fingers lingering over the same titles as he read aloud. He made them laugh. He made her laugh, quietly, to herself, from behind a half-closed door. She found herself walking past the bakery in the evenings, always hoping to glimpse him through the fogged-up window. And every night he was there, a paperback in hand, reading like he had nowhere else to be. Sometimes he'd glance up and smile, like he knew she'd been watching all along. 1 week later, Emma finally walked into the bakery just before closing. She held something small in her hand, his note, folded, slightly crumpled at the edges. She sat across from him and pushed it toward him silently. He looked down at the paper, then back at her. "I kept it," she whispered. "I didn't know why at first." Grayson's throat tightened. "Do you know now?" She nodded. "Because it wasn't just one night for me either. I was just terrified to admit it." He reached for her hand, slowly, letting her pull away if she wanted. She didn't, their fingers intertwined like puzzle pieces long separated. "You make me want to be better, Emma," he said. "Not for the cameras, not for the company. Just for you." She smiled, small and trembling. "I'm still scared." "So am I," he whispered. "But I'd rather be scared with you than brave without you." A few months later, under the fading gold of an autumn afternoon, Emma stood barefoot in the grass of her sister's backyard, her white sundress fluttering in the breeze. Friends and family gathered around, laughter mingling with the scent of cinnamon and salt air. There was no ballroom, no press, no diamond-studded displays, just a wooden arch draped in daisies and the steady rhythm of waves crashing beyond the trees. Grayson waited at the altar and rolled up sleeves, a daisy tucked into his breast pocket. When Emma walked toward him, hand in hand with her father, every doubt she'd ever known melted away. His eyes were locked on hers as if nothing else in the world existed. When it was time for their vows, Grayson took her hands and said, "You taught me that love isn't found in grand gestures or headlines. It's in vanilla, lattes, quiet glances, and the way your voice shakes when you're trying not to cry. I promise to hold your hand even when you try to pull away, and to never, ever let one night define our story." Emma's voice wavered as she replied, "You made me feel seen when I was invisible. I promise to walk beside you even when I'm scared. And I promise to believe in us, even on the days when it's hard." They exchanged simple silver rings, each engraved with the words, "Not just one night." Their kiss was gentle, full of tears and laughter and everything that had brought them to this moment. That night, they walked barefoot along the beach, hand in hand beneath a sky full of stars. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. "Forever doesn't seem so scary anymore," she murmured. Grayson smiled. "That's because you're not alone anymore." And neither of them ever would be again. Life lesson from the story. Sometimes the most powerful love stories don't begin with grand gestures. They begin with broken hearts, missed chances, and a quiet moment of truth. Emma and Grayson's journey reminds us that love isn't always loud or perfect. It's messy, it's uncertain, it's filled with fear, misunderstandings, and the haunting pull of what if. But real love? It fights through that. It doesn't give up just because it gets hard. This story teaches us that sometimes one night can change everything. Not because of what happens, but because of what it reveals. Who we are when we let our walls down. When we allow someone to see us at our most vulnerable. And in doing so, we give ourselves the chance to be loved, not for what we present to the world, but for who we truly are. We also learn the importance of courage. It takes courage to walk away from a life planned by others. It takes even more to fight for someone who might walk away again. But if something or someone makes you feel more alive, more seen, more you, then that risk might be the one that leads to the love of a lifetime. So take the leap, speak the truth, and never underestimate the power of showing up for someone, even if it's in the rain with nothing but hope. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story moved you, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more heartfelt, meaningful love stories, just like this one. Thank you for being part of our story-loving community.